Okay, we have a public hearing
Windows. We're getting Linux.
first on the agenda. An acceptance of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation grant of $7,500. I'm Michelle, I believe you're going to talk about that.
Yep. So the grant was for the music. It's the Brooks Fund from the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And it's gonna upgrade our percussion equipment to our marching band. So it was written specifically to replace drums. A total of 12 drums, 12 different drums. So that all the students that are in that band can participate in the marching band moving forward, so the parades and whatnot. It also covered for the New England Band and Choral Festivals. Both are in Plymouth State University, so there's money for that, to cover that this year. And I also did 60 students to go to Music in the Parks, and that fund is also covered in this. The entry fees and the transportation and all of that was covered under the grant. Hope you were accepted.
Any discussion from anybody? Any from the board?
No.
Okay, hearing none, I'll call this public
There are-
meeting closed.
There are requirements, New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, that what was written for is the only thing we can spend the money on.
Yeah.
So then you do accept it, you'll have to appropriate it to that purpose, please.
Okay,
And you say, when you say upgrade, you mean replace or add
Yes.
more?
Yes.
Okay.
Replace and add, because we haven't had enough for them to all march in a band.
Oh,
So it's a combination of both.
okay.
couldn't get any band uniforms out of that?
Didn't write it down for
Okay,
Thanks.
so anything else? Okay, so now the public meeting is closed. I'll call this meeting to order. Is there any public input? Seeing none, we have a presentation on restorative justice from Jay Apostelli and Sam Madden.
He's running a little bit late. We did childcare issues, so he'll be here shortly.
Okay.
Yeah, just real quick before Jay starts, I left for you a packet on RJ for you to look through. I asked Jay to come. I talked to Steve a while back. Jay's a former Littleton resident, Patriots Drive guy. Kids went to school here. He's done a lot with restorative justice in Grafton County. He's currently working at Belknap County Corrections, even doing some restorative justice in the prison itself. He's done 2 or 3 different trainings for us here over the last 5 or 6 years. Enough so that there's certainly some interest in the school. Definitely need more training. Sam has recently written his thesis on RJ, so I asked him to come and kind of chime in. He's kind of a rookie at this, but is a believer as well. So with that said, thanks for coming, Jay.
Oh, you bet. I can't sit down. Takes a while. So this is what we use to really describe restorative justice and restorative practices and how it differs from other things. There's two models. There's one model, the retributive justice, which is, so it asks 3 questions. It asks what law was broken, what rules were broken, who did it, how do we punish them? Restorative practices use something different. We don't talk about laws. We talk about harm. There was harm that was caused. So what harm was caused? Who's responsible for repairing it, and how is it going to be repaired? So in a retributive model, it's breaking the rules or the policy or breaking the law, and it's all about the offender. In restorative practices, it's victim-centered. It's about the victim. So the victim has direct input about how the harm is going to be repaired to them. So in here, what you see is, we use this is the first thing we do in restorative practices. So you see those 2 lines, one on the bottom is low support, encouragement, nurturing, goes from low to high. And then on the other side, it's limit setting, discipline, and control from low to high. So if you're in that low support, low control, what we would say is you're not working with anybody. So it's neglectful. So the message to the person there is, we really don't care about you. We don't care if you're here. We don't even care enough to set limits and discipline you, or even to nurture you or encourage you. So that model, you see a lot of that with, kids that are involved with DCYF, or kids that are just kind of, I've worked with a lot of kids that were just never really connected anywhere in the community. I mean, you ask them, is there an adult in the school that you work with, and you talk to them, they go, no. And you're just kind of wandering around. A lot of those kids end up in placements, or they end up in trouble because they're not very good at parenting themselves. They just don't have that skill. Next is, if you're low on control, limit setting, and discipline, and you're very high on support, encouragement, and nurturing, what we call that is paternalistic. So those are, I always think of them as the parents that, when you see curling, people out there with the brushes, that's what they do. They brush away all the trouble. They brush away all the problems, right? So they essentially, the message to the kid or to the person is, you really can't handle this. We're gonna handle it for you because you're gonna mess it up, or you don't know what you're doing, so we're gonna take care of it. So you see, my hunch would be, you see a lot of parents who intervene on behalf of the kid, even though the kid's in trouble, but it can't be my kid. It's always, and it's very paternalistic. So what I don't like about that model is the kids in there never really develop any conflict resolution skills. They don't get what I would call a struggle muscle. They don't get to be resilient because someone's always doing that. So when I saw a lot of kids at YDC, they were just like that. Or they were on the other side where they received low support, encouragement, and nurturing, and it was very high on being punitive and authoritarian. So with kids that I saw there, the message is, you're out of control, you don't have internal control, so we have to control you. So a lot of the kids that I saw at YDC when I first got there they were being punished all the time, but they weren't learning anything. And the idea of having to sit across from somebody that you hurt and work this out, they would just say, just put me in my room, just punish me. Because it was easier, and that's how they had grown up. So kids that would leave there, or room, or kids, and I was no angel in school, I got sent to the office. And what I learned by coming out was I wanted two things. I wanted to either forget about it, or I wanted revenge. The relationship between myself and the teacher was not good after that, because it just wasn't working, or I just wanted to forget about it. So what we try to do with restorative practices, and that punitive practice, it's authoritarian. These are the rules, jump this high, do all that. I mean, it's really, I spent a lot of years in probation, juvenile probation, and that's what we did. We measured things, show up on time, drug tests, come to your house, do those things. And I have to tell you, it worked while they were on probation. After they were off probation, they kind of went back to doing what they were doing before. So that model really didn't work. The recidivism model for most corrections, like jails or whatever, it's like 60%. And we were doing restorative practices in Grafton County, also in Belknap County. I was just finished with doing restorative justice for adults. Our recidivism rate was 7%. So people that went through that process barely reoffended. If they did, it was usually less than what got them involved, or it was like a technical violation, something, they missed a court hearing or something. Now, that goes to our restorative practices. So what we try to do there is both. So we want to discipline, limit, set, control, but also that we're going to support and nurture. So what we do there is offer a person a way back to full citizenship again. We don't want to ostracize them. We know that when we ostracize people, they get worse. They don't get better. So what we try to do is give them a way back to repair the harm that they've done to the victim, repair the harm that they've done to the community, because community members are involved too, and they have input into how it's going to be repaired. So what we do is we work with people. The message that the person receives in a restorative model is, you can handle this. We're not behind you, hitting you with a stick, and we're not forgiving you or making it easy for you. You have to fix what you've broken. And that means you have to fix it for people and fix it for the community. So what we'll do is say, we'll walk with you. It's hard, but you can manage this. You can do it. So our, again, our recidivism rate is really low with that. Anyone have any questions so far? Got any of that? Okay. So with that in mind, what we do is we, these are the questions that we ask people. Okay. Oh, you got it? Okay. So, you know, oftentimes you talk to kids and everyone wants to know why, and you know, they make up stories. So we don't talk about that. What we talk about is, so one side you'll see is for the person who's caused harm. What we do is we ask them, tell us what happened. What were you thinking of at the time? What have you thought about since? Who have you affected and how? And how are you going to fix this? How are you going to repair the harm that you've caused? And that harm could be to an individual. It could be, well, it harms the school because we don't want to live like this in the community, right? This is not how we live together. So the next set of questions on the back would address the person who was hurt. What did you think when you first realized what had happened? How has this affected you? How has it affected, who else was affected? How was everybody, because kids don't grow up in a vacuum, they're with their parents, and the parents talk to friends in the community. And then what is it that this person can do to make it right for you? They have to make it right. And so the person who was harmed has direct input. It's not an arbitrary person. It's not a judge or a probation officer, social worker, police, or an authority in school. The person who was hurt has input into that. So I can give you a real, I tell the story all the time up here because it happened with my son Nicholas. We lived on Patriots Drive, and we went down to John and Sue's when it was there 1,000 years ago. And so I was getting milk and stuff, and we were walking back, and Nicholas came out and he pulled out a pack of gum out of his pocket. And so he just had the money, and I didn't buy it, so it was like back to John and Sue's. So of course he's like looking at his shoes all the way back. And so we go in and I say to Sue, I said, Nicholas he's got something to tell you. And he puts the gum on the table and now he's looking at the linoleum. It's fascinating. So he says, I stole this. And at the time it was just, I had no idea it was restorative justice, but it was just a remarkable moment. Sue says to him, and he's like, right? She says, Nicholas, you're my friend. You never have to steal from me. You ask me. You can have all the gum in this store. You can have all the candy in this store because you're my friend. Now he's just blubbering, you know. But something happens there, and that is the relationship gets repaired. So I don't know if she saw him take the gum. So, but I do know this. He doesn't have to walk by John and Sue's like this. And she's not looking out the window at Nick Appicelli as no good dad, right? So, and that's what restorative practices do. It puts people back together. So let me just say this too, because I'm a real advocate. I'm not trying to sell it to you, pitch it. I'm not. You know, when I talk to people on school boards, I talk to people in the school, they go, oh, we're going to get rid of the handbook. Oh, it's no discipline. It's just going to be, no. This is an alternative to that. So you can suspend, you know, in my estimation, suspend kids, but they never have to reintegrate back and address the harm that they've caused. They just kind of walk in like I did. I just want to forget about it, or I hate this place, or I want revenge. So the idea of meeting with somebody at the school to say, how are you not gonna do this again? We have to reintegrate you back into our community again, because you violated the rules here, right? And the norms in the community. Or it can be sitting across from the person that you harmed and having that person give them direct input and say, this is what you did to me. So, as an example, I use this example all the time. So I'm sitting next to Al, we're in the cafeteria, I lean over and I say something to Al and he punches me. So you'd say, oh geez, Jay's the immediate victim. Well, it may be. Sure. But you all witnessed it. So what we would say is you're affected parties. So when you leave the cafeteria, you go back to what are you gonna say? Hey, how was lunch? Oh, it was fine, nothing happened. It's like, oh my God, you should have seen what happened. Al punched Jay in the nose with blood everywhere. And then by the time he reaches here, it's like I pistol whipped the kid, and everybody's panicked. So what we talk about is repairing that harm. Because those kids go home and they, hi honey, how was school? Oh my God, you should have seen, right? And then before you know it, those parents are going to work. Like, school's in chaos, it's crazy. And so what you see is you get more of a fear factor that starts to lift in the community, right? Because they think everything's out of control. So then we spend our money on police or more cameras or radios or whatever. That's money that doesn't go to other places. So what I would say is it really doesn't take the place of the handbook or the discipline code. It can be used in conjunction with. So say you're going to suspend a kid for 10 days. Say you can go for 4 days, but you have to sit with the person you harmed and their parents, and your parents are coming, and whoever is part of the school, because the school has input to say this is not how we live together. And how are you not going to do this again? So, I went to Catholic school. I got punished a lot. It didn't change me at all. I just got sneaky. I learned how not to get caught. That's all I learned, right? That's what I learned. It didn't change me that much, right? Because it didn't change this and it didn't change that. But when you have to sit across from a person and hear what you did to them, it's powerful. So what the victim gets, or the person who was harmed, what they get is they get a sense of their safety back. Now I understand what happened. And for the person who's causing the harm, what they get is they get victim empathy. They understand. I just didn't break the law. I didn't hurt you because you're the vice principal. I hurt this kid, and I hurt his family, his parents too, because they attempt. They want to understand what's going on. Do you have any questions about that? Any of that? What do you think?
Well, to me, that sounds great. No, I'll give it to you. No
Of course.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
It sounds perfect in a perfect environment. And I believe in this restorative justice. I think I do. My concern is how do you, there's only so many people here that are doing millions of different things. I see a lot of time, not that it's not well spent, but I see a lot of time that will need to go to this.
Mhm.
And I don't know how the follow-up is. That was my one question. How do you bring it to closure? Okay, you get the kids, you get them all together, kumbaya, we're all talking about what happened, and hopefully there's good results, but how do we know? And second of all, I was wondering how many districts do this already?
So what happens when people meet in a conference?
Mhm.
The end result of that is an agreement. So you
Oh,
come up
okay.
with a memorandum of understanding.
Okay,
And then, so what you'll do, like say it's in the community, so you have a kid who did something. I can give you an example. So when I was working at Katy, running their restorative justice program, down Highland Street, this kid was doing, it's like 40, 35 miles, the kid was doing like 60. Inexperienced driving, right? So they took him to court, but his insurance rate would have went up, he would have got big fines. So they sent him to us. So what I did was I went up and down the street and I got like 4 people who live in that community to sit in on a panel and tell this kid about how speeding affects them. And he was like, I've had my pets killed there. I don't even cross the street there because people do. So there was a lot of that, but then the community said, you know, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna research how much the insurance would have cost. You're gonna go to the hospital and talk to some EMTs about speeding, people who have been in car accidents. He had to stand with a crossing guard there for 20 hours. And then he had to do something in school for driver's ed. He had to make a poster and all that stuff. And he had 90 days to do that. And then he came back to the panel and the panel reviewed everything and that was it. So it worked out. And plus I brought my dog. You know, he could have killed my dog. I used to take my dog with me. So there's a memorandum of understanding. There's a time limits on that memorandum that they have to do certain things to repair the harm that they've caused. Phillips Exeter Academy has gone all restorative justice. They've even taken their handbook out and they've just taken it out. So if you say in a perfect world, I do this in jail. There's not much more of an imperfect place.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of schools, I'm thinking of not jail.
Well, schools,
some people-
when we first started to talk about this, it was with the Life of an Athlete program. So
Yeah.
we I think it was 88 schools, and it started with the sports programs, and then a lot of the other programs said, hey, wait a minute, how come we don't have that in our band, or how come we don't get an opportunity to do it in marketing, or do whatever? It kind of expanded to a lot of different schools. So it works. So, and I think that's what's happening. So is it time consuming? Doesn't have to be. When I was at YEC, I'd see a kid in the hall, and all I had to do was ask him those questions. Tell me what happened. I want to see you after school. Who did you hurt? Tell me how you're going to fix it. It's a 2-minute conversation. But it wasn't that, get in here. Because I would submit to you, you can, you know, that it takes more time to file the process, fill out the paperwork, you know, and go through that. And the result is they come back and do the same thing.
Well, they're gonna have to be dealt with anyway, I mean, Greg will attest to that, so.
So the interesting thing is, I ran the data today, I just shared it with him, 60% of people that go to jail go back to jail. 60% of our kids that we suspended this year got suspended more than once.
Okay. And you,
So it tells you that the suspensions are effective in one way. Gives the teacher a break a little bit, maybe it gives the kid or the kids that they affect a short break, but it doesn't fix the problem. Can you talk about, so, and Sam, chime in from your recent experience too. Can you talk about informal stuff and starting with the elementary school? And then when we may not use this, like, so an example where restorative practices are not something that we would even entertain.
Sure, there's a lot of different practices. I think there's another slide.
So I remember that one of the keys that you preach when we listened to this before is that the kid has to take ownership for what they do in order to like kind of go through this process. If I don't take ownership for what I did,
I'm gonna do it.
then you're gonna just throw the book at me and it is what it is because I don't care, right? So that's an example of when we might not do this. But in a perfect world, if we started with kind of fidelity at a younger age and we teach kids to have empathy for other people, we have less of what we're dealing with at the middle and high school right now, which is the constant disruptions and disrespect and those things that are minor in comparison to maybe some larger school districts in big cities, but our biggest problem, that suspending those kids is not necessarily working either.
Well, they're coming back, and most of the time they're angry, and so are their parents. So there's a lot of different restorative practices. One of them is circles. So what happens, especially for younger kids, we even did it at YMCA, used to circle the kids up. So if you've ever worked in a residential program, kids are pilfering from each other all the time. You know, they're taking stuff. So instead of playing, CSI Littleton, let's grab the bad kid, whack them around in front of everybody. What we would do is group the kids together and just say, have you ever had anything stolen from you? What was it, and how did that make you feel? So the kid who's even doing the stealing is hearing it from the entire community. And what we saw was the stealing started to drop off. Because they're hearing it from their peers. They're not hearing it from me. I'm gonna punish them because you stole it. This is the effect you're having on people. So what you saw is that it kind of dropped off. In Things that were of a higher degree at YDC, the kids were very reluctant to do it because they were scared. I'm not talking about the victims, I'm talking about the kids, the offenders. They were scared because they've never been in a position where they've had to do that with anybody. To actually sit across from somebody and say, I was wrong, and this is what you did to me, and you're gonna tell me how you made me feel. You're gonna tell me that. They didn't want to do it because they were never trained that way. So the idea of grouping kids together, and I used to tell the staff there all the time, they said, well, these kids are dangerous. I said, the most dangerous kid in the building is the one you don't know. It's not the kid with the worst offense, it's the one you don't know. So nobody eats alone, everybody, right? So we group people together, and the idea is, if they have a relationship with you, that's more safety than you're ever gonna get. Are they gonna act out? Sure, but not with you, because they have that relationship. So we did a lot of that kind of work there. Grouping kids together, all of a sudden they get to know each other. And what they find is that they're not so diverse after all. They actually have more in common with each other than they realize. So what you'll see is, once they start to know each other better, and my hunch is, those kids at the elementary school are going all the way through the system together, you know? So that idea of building those relationships early, and it's not that you broke the rule, but you hurt somebody. Yeah, it's powerful. Adults don't like to do this, but it's powerful when you see it. You know? So there's reparative panels, and those are usually at the highest level. There's maybe 10% of the cases that you do that with, really. A lot of it is just the way people talk to each other, the way that they group together. I knew that things were working at YDC when kids would call, we need to group up. They'd call a group because things were getting, things were going sideways and they didn't like it. So when we had kids at YDC who went out, because we started the basketball team, they went to the YMCA. And so we grouped them together before we left, and then we grouped them when they came back. So the idea, so the kids go on field trips, you group them together before they go. These are the expectations, these are the rules, who's got so-and-so's back. Kids with special ed, in a group like that, you may even ask them, what's gonna be the hardest part of your day? What's gonna be hard for you today? And the kids will say, lunch is terrible for me, or this class. And so then you ask the kids in the group, well, who's got his back? Who's gonna help out at lunch? Who's gonna sit with me? I've never seen all the kids go, no, I'm not. They go, oh, yeah, I will. And then you group them again. You say, how did it go? It's like, yeah, lunch was not so bad. Well, let's build on that, right? But the idea of just connecting them, and it doesn't, I think one of the things I really like about restorative practices, it's not about money. It's about a change of paradigm. It's how you view rule breaking. It's how you do it. Right? So kids that bully, I think you can punish them all you want. They're not gonna stop. They may even get worse. But if you have to sit across from a kid that you bullied and their parent, and your parents are there, and the school, that's powerful. It's a powerful thing. So there's a lot of practices. You'll talk about family group conferencing, do with parents and kids, peace circles, people come together, community conferencing. There's even the idea of just making restitution in a way, right? Because we just kind of view it as, for kids, really, it's a lot of them just take a dip in the stupid pond, and they just do dumb stuff. And they just don't realize the consequence or who they hurt. And then once they hear that, they go, I had no idea. Yeah, you affected a lot of people. One of the powers of restorative conference, especially in towns like this, so if you have people come in who represent the community, they'll go, I know your uncle, or I used to live across the street from you, or I used to, my uncle used to live in that neighborhood. Do you remember so-and-so? That makes the connection between people. So it's unfortunate when we started the restorative justice program here in Littleton, I think they kind of pulled it back and it's North Haven. But we were doing conferences, thanks to the school, in the basement. And they worked out. They worked out. We never saw those kids again. The police chief in Plymouth, he doesn't send anybody to juvenile court. They all go through restorative because he never sees the kids again. So did I cover everything here? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, Sam, you wanna speak up at all about what you?
So, some of the ways, there's already some of this stuff happening at Lakewood. One of the examples that I think people are doing without realizing are the morning meetings. So somebody raised the concern about time. There's already time set aside, usually at the start of the day. Depending on what's been going on, sometimes it'll just be basic community building activities. If there's something that's happened or something coming up, that'll get addressed. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So, that relationship building is already happening. And you can see with the staff that does it faithfully, the relationships are a lot stronger with the students. They're more comfortable talking.
Who goes there, Sam? Who attends these mornings?
It's just classroom wide. It's the start of the day. Usually
Oh,
most,
so nobody's singled out, everybody?
yeah, no, everybody's, and
Oh, okay,
it's just
okay.
part of the day.
Oh,
So
okay.
some days, if there's nothing big that's happened, it
Okay.
could be, tell us what your favorite flavor of ice cream is. And, something as basic as that, if there was an incident on the playground or this happened or something happened. I remember one of the fifth grade teachers, one of the school shootings that happened during the year, that was talked about in the meeting. And that, that was really impressive to listen to her run that and have the students kind of talk about, what they were afraid of or what they heard. I've done some stuff, more informally, being the only male on the second floor, I tend to be the first line of defense when it comes to some of the minor behaviors. So one of the things that I've changed this year that's been really impactful is when I'm talking to a student in my room, instead of starting out with, what did you do? Which immediately puts somebody on the defensive, and instead of talking about the problem, they're immediately trying to come up with a reason why it happened, an excuse. So now I start with what happened. And particularly if there's two students involved. One example that we did with a group of sixth graders, there was, I guess you call it a fight, it was just, typical sixth grade pushing and shoving over a game of kickball. So we had the students come up along with 3 other students that were involved, and where it was really impressive to see the kids talk, it was the 3 kids that watched it, and the person that instigated had to sit there and listen. We were scared because we didn't know what you were going to do next. And it was solved right there. It didn't have to get to the administrative level. We told them about it, but it didn't have to become a big thing. We talked about it right then. The problem was solved. Everybody was able to go back to class. And another thing that I've seen that's helped with a lot of students that I work with on my caseload is, the classic, somebody will just pick and pick and pick and pick and pick, and then there's the reaction. Whether it's verbal, whether it's physical. And if you're doing purely punitive stuff, the kid that reacts is the one that gets in trouble. The problem isn't solved, and you have the resentment and all the stuff that Jay talked about. But when you get those 2 kids together and they get a chance to talk, and student A says, you kept telling me my shoes were ugly, or you kept calling me stupid, or you kept doing this, then you can see the kid also, oh, you know what, I was wrong, and they can go back to class and we don't have to deal with it again. Where if it's one kid goes to the office, then it's just a matter of time before the other end comes. So, I think it's something that's important as well, because a lot of the work that you do with those students, you're teaching them how to be resilient, how to problem solve, how to handle conflict that they may not be getting outside of school. So this might be their chance to learn. And I think, with my work with some of these students, the better the relationship is when something big does happen, it's a lot easier to kind of get to the bottom of it, as opposed to having to work with them for an hour while they go through their defensive mode. You can just kind of get to the root of the problem, talk about it, and help them out with it, so.
Thank you.
If I can just add one thing, because I forgot to add. In that example with Al and I in the cafeteria, so what happens is Al's gonna go get punched. But everybody who witnessed it looks at him differently now. Because I used to know you until you hit somebody. And then you hit somebody, and now you're sketchy. It's something that don't kick Al Smith off. So what happens for Al is he gets a little more isolated. Because now I don't want to be around him because, gee, I thought I knew this kid, but now I don't know him so well anymore. It's kind of sketchy. So one of the things that we talk a lot about in restorative practices is we don't want to be afraid of you. You're one of us. You live here with us. We don't want to be afraid of you, but something's going on. We don't know what it is, but here's your opportunity to tell us. And this is the effect you're having on us. So a lot of that, what we call affective language for, let's say, a teacher, wouldn't be, you're talking in class, shut up, go to the office. It would be more of, I'm having a really hard time teaching in this class because you're talking and it's disrespectful to me. Because I'm trying to do my job. That's a whole different spin than sit down and shut up. You know, so a lot of that affective language is about that. Identify the behavior, address the behavior, and then this is how I feel about what you just did. And then what you find is kids kind of go, I didn't know that. Or I didn't think I was being disrespectful, or I hurt your feelings, I didn't realize that. It's really, it's power, it's a powerful moment. So there's a lot of different practices that can be done. And like I said before, one of the beautiful things to me about restorative practices, it's not about money. It's about changing the paradigm. And the other idea is, and I've told this to other school boards too, you know, we can keep doing and doing and doing and have 60%, frequent flyer rates, or we can try something else. And when it gets measured in schools like St. Louis, Chicago, San Diego, they find it works. So kids that are even coming back from placement have to sit and re-enter the school again. You've been away and now you're coming back, whether it's been YDC or you've been wherever you've been, and now you're coming back. Well, this is how are we going to support you so we never see you leave again? We want you here. I don't know what else to do. There's a lot. I mean, I could talk up here for 40 hours. But do you have any questions?
I'm just curious, and I've heard you speak before, and
Yeah.
it's great to have you here, so thank you for coming. One of the questions I have is what happens, and you guys I'm sure can chime in, when you have a child that goes through this process, but knows people around him well enough, knows how to get around it, and keeps coming back? At what point do you say, okay, this is just not gonna work for you?
So one of the things is this is voluntary. You can't make people do this. So they have to want to do it. So that's the idea of leveraging. You can get with this and take the punishment, or you can take a little less punishment, and we're going to encourage you to go through this. That's one way to do it. So you're kind of leveraging that.
But if they know that this is what they have to go through and they can
Well,
game their way through it, that's what my question is.
I have to tell you, I've sat in conferences and and I'm writing it down, and I've said it. You know what, you're saying all the right stuff.
Right.
I don't trust it.
So
I don't think you're sincere, but I'll tell you what, if you live up to these obligations, fine.
Okay.
Or you don't want frequent flyers, and here's the reason. You re-victimize the victim, and you re-victimize the community. I'm not gonna have that. So you're gonna go and take your whack, because obviously you don't get it.
Okay.
You're not sincere about what you're putting over here, and you think you're scamming us, you're not.
it brings adults into the process and helps not necessarily hold adults accountable for being part of the solution, but in a way it kind of does. But it also gives you, whoever's doing this job, an opportunity to come back and say, this is the second or third time.
Right.
We sat with this, you agreed to this, Mom, you agreed that your son or daughter would, and here we are, we haven't done it. Rather than, last time was 3 days, this time 5 days, and and it's,
Right.
and they're right back again. So, to answer your question, there's multiple answers, and I think it depends on the kid.
Uh-huh.
And there's some kids that we wouldn't even go through step one with because they don't take the ownership. And how many times are they gonna pull the wool over our eyes? Once or twice, maybe? And then they're gonna get the handbook. And by then, it's their third violation and their consequence is stiffer.
Well, that's what my question was, is how many times do you give the benefit of the doubt, basically?
Well, and when I was doing juvenile restorative justice and adult restorative justice, you get one shot, that's it.
The staff's
This
gonna have
isn't,
to buy
you just
into
keep
it,
coming
right?
back. No.
Everybody's gonna have to do it, the staff is,
Well,
I mean, we can't, I
we,
mean,
we, in my
Sam,
opinion, we've done bits and pieces of it.
I think you have too, yeah.
I'd be lying if I didn't feel like everybody in the district supports it, which is kind of why we're here.
Yeah,
Because
I know
we either have to do it or we got to abandon ship. Like, it needs to be something, I think Sam would agree, we've talked recently, like we've got to do this with fidelity. Like, and there's got to be a time period to see some improvement. It's not just going to happen overnight.
no,
I believe if you were to ask the staff, they believe in it, and the training that we've had recently. We need more training, so we're gonna have to put some time and some money into making sure that people get trained in this continually, but adults in the community have got to buy into allowing the process to take hold, whether it's my kid, your kids, or somebody else. It's a process, and I think Jay hit the nail on the head that there's a lot of life lessons these kids have to learn without us sweeping everything away from in front of them too. And there's a lot of value in that. But if we don't have that adult support within our community, it's never gonna happen.
no, I totally get that, and I like that, I like the fact that someone is willing to put the time in to, if you don't say punish, you work with the
Hold them
situation.
accountable
Hmm.
in a real way.
But I am concerned of how it's implemented
Mhm.
and that everybody's consistent with it, you know, that's all. I mean, if only a couple are doing it and one gets restorative justice and one doesn't,
Right.
that's not gonna work.
I agree.
It's,
And the other part that I would just mention too, a lot of with restorative practices, in my experience, that it's like your next door neighbor who's building something in the garage at night. There's a lot of noise and the lights are on, but what are they doing in there? And so the idea is to be able to open that up. And I would absolutely come up here and talk to parents and do it, whatever.
One of the things that I've done, I got started with this, working on my graduate coursework is, has to do with restorative justice. And just in talking with the staff, you know, as people that I may need to do some stuff with for the coursework, I think everybody is on board with it. I haven't had a conversation with anybody at Lakewood that's against it. The concerns that like everybody's brought up are not necessarily what they're doing, but how it gets done. And part of what I've done, I got hooked up with a group called the Upper Valley Restorative Justice Task Force. That it's all the New Hampshire and Vermont schools down in Hanover. They've been doing it for a while now. And one of the things that I wish I could remember which school the gentleman was the principal at, but in one of our working groups, he talked about how they implemented it. And you know, when any type of initiative, you've got the people that are on board right away. You've got the group of people that want to do it, but they're hesitant, and then the people that are against it. And what he did is they started the trainings at the beginning of the year, and his goal was over the course of that school year to get everybody on board. And he told everybody in one of their meetings that I don't want you doing this until you're comfortable running it on your own. So that process was he had his group of people that were on board, they were comfortable with it, they jumped right in. And then they started to work with other staff members in between trainings to get those people, and then they started. And he said by the end of the year, he had the majority of the staff, you know, the percentage was into the 90s, and even the people that were against it saw that it was successful. So I think the biggest thing to answer your question about the implementation and things like that is it's getting people comfortable doing it. Because I think what he said, what I've seen with a couple of the teachers I've done stuff with, is they're already doing a lot of it. Now there's just kind of a name to it and, you know, a little more structure, but it's just that comfort level of getting people, you know, on board and not trying to do bits and pieces here and there. It's not going to be something that you do a training on day one, and then everybody's doing it on day two. It might take some time, but within, you know, weeks to months, not years, you're going to have everybody on board, and the students will pick up on that. When the teachers are comfortable doing it, the students will buy into it, and then you start to build that community.
Michelle?
I was just gonna say that above the notch, we used, I'm trained in restorative justice and used it in my prior job quite a lot. But I used it this year and on a couple of occasions with above the notch, and we did a restorative circle, where some girls were they were just fooling around in their eyes, but it offended another person. And we came together in a circle and had a discussion so they could see either side of it. It came out positive. One student in that group continued it, and we went to the next level with her, and she was suspended. So, but the other, all of them came together to realize their part in this, and we restored it, and everyone gets along at the end of the semester and move forward. They all stayed in their classrooms and didn't exclude anyone out. But I did use restorative justice in those situations.
And it's not a panacea. I've been in conferences that went south, trust me, you know? So I trained about 30 teachers in Franklin, and by the end of the year, they said, we've had it with this kid, we want a restorative conference. Well, you know, he lived with his grandmother. The relationship between the grandmother and the school was terrible because they were throwing the kid out all the time. So anytime she got a call from the school, it was like, oh, here we go again. So they said, we need to do this right away. So it's like, well, wait a minute, I need to be able to talk to the grandmother. I need to be able to talk, you know, so we're gonna have this formal conference. And they said, we don't have time for that, dude. So the grandmother came in, she sat for maybe 10 minutes. She said, that's it, grabbed the kid and left. But there was no prep work. Because they didn't understand, she had no idea what they were doing. She thought they were just out to punish the kid. They were out to punish the kid at all. You know, they wanted, but, and great for her, she called the school 2 weeks later and said, I'd like to try that again when he comes back next year before he starts school with new teachers.
What grade level was that kid?
He was in 8th grade.
8th grade?
But the relationship between the parents and the school was just terrible. That was hard to overcome. They really resented the school. You know? So, yeah, it really is an amazing thing. So then after a conference, this is like, to me, the best part. So one of the things that happens after the conference, and the stories are told, and, you know, and the memorandum's written, there's a point where what we call breaking bread. So there may be donuts or cookies or whatever. And people go over, and what you do is you see these people start to reconnect. You know, because all the tension's gone. Now I understand what you did, you understand me, and, you know, it's not such a bad kid. And, it's kind of, that's the best part for me. Yeah, that was. Any questions? We just scratched the surface.
Yeah, really, there's a lot here to look at.
I would add too that it does fit nicely into a lot of things that we're already doing at Lakeway with Choose Love and our curriculum that Peggy and Lisa, second step that they've been implementing. So it's just kind of another layer. It really is more effective with the older kids, but we've been able to sort of wrap that in with the younger crew in morning meeting and talking about something that happened in the classroom that might have bothered everybody in there. You know, when somebody got upset and tipped over a chair, it just kind of takes the opportunity to talk about it as a whole class and take that fear piece out for kids. But it's been fitting nicely, and we have a few teachers that are very comfortable using it. I think the more they demonstrate that it's successful, like Sam said, we're getting more buy-in and more comfort from the other staff members.
Yeah, see, I think that's so powerful. Because that kid that flips the chair over, whatever, you don't want to be afraid of him. Something's going on there, but it affects everybody in that room. And they go, oh, geez, these are little sketches. In a way, right? But if you can kind of reintegrate them back in and say, this is what happened, you know, I was upset or whatever. And then everyone kind of gets an understanding about what's going on with that. They say, how are we going to support them? How are we going to help them so that doesn't happen again? We don't want to be in the classroom like this. Right?
So it's also proactive though.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just reactive, and it's anywhere from how you speak to a kid to when you're dealing with a major issue where you're doing a formal circle, which is what percent of the time?
10%.
Single digits?
10%.
So that formal process may not happen that
That's
often.
real serious.
But it's not in lieu of a kid getting in trouble. It's still part of the consequence chain, if you will.
Well, you have to fix it for us. Look what you're doing. You know, I'm
Sometimes-
taking time out. How are you affecting me? I'm taking time out of my day to sit with you because you're playing up. You know. So let me tell you how you're affecting me. Let me tell you how you affect the rest of the school. And you know, if the teacher's there and says, this is what you did to the class, or even great idea would be to reintegrate the kid back in the class. To say, this is how I felt when you did that.
The kid that constantly gets kicked out or get in trouble or we're calling home and they they hate school and the parent or the grandparent despises because we're always pointing the finger at them, they disrupt school for everybody else too. And they'll continue to do so until we find a way to make school a more positive environment for those kids that we're picking on. We're not picking on them, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the way they understand it. It's always my fault. You're always calling me. Why are you always suspending my kid? So until those kids enjoy or at least don't hate coming to school, it's gonna affect all of our kids that are here.
And the teachers.
Well, absolutely. You know, and they're working their butt off to try to manage it all. And the one thing I'll leave you with, and then I'll be quiet, is when we take a kid back to a teacher to speak to that teacher after they've disrupted or they've disrespected, I've never ever heard a teacher not say something positive to that kid. I really like you. You're a really smart kid. This is what you do to me, or this is what you do in the class. You're really funny, but I need you to do something. I need you to take the class more serious because I can't do my job. It's not always negative. They're always hearing something positive too. And that doesn't happen in 1990 when Greg Philly gets sent to Mr. Black and you get this. And I didn't get anything positive when I went back. You know?
I'm sure you did.
So there's some advantages to it, but
Well, it's not why did you do it, it's what were you after? What were you doing in there? And let me tell you how I feel about this. You disrespected.
Well, you're
and
giving them a voice.
You disrespected my class.
But
That's how I feel.
the language is in our handbooks. I think it's something that we gotta continue to talk about over the course of the summer. And we either do it and we all buy into doing it, or we elect to do something different.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
You're like a
you.
Charlie Brown teacher up here.
No,
There's a lot.
It is.
It's important.
Thank you so much.
All right, this is the first time that Jasper's gonna help you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. What an honor. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you for that. Bye, Jay.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of the June 3rd school board meeting. Do I hear a motion?
Come on.
There's second. Second. Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. The June 12th school board work session. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any errors or omissions? Hearing none, motion carries. Oh, say yes.
Yes.
Thank you on the situation here. Okay, the manifests are going around. Treasurer's report.
Okay, the treasurer's report you should have in front of you. It's pretty self-explanatory. Everything seems to come out perfect, which it should. And you have it there. If there are any questions. There's one thing I want to add though, and that's in the manifest that's going around. If you look at it real close, you'll see the transportation for the spring sports
Yep.
adds up real good. And if we use the van, we saved over $10,000 this spring by using the van, the new white van.
Yep.
We got to thank Dr. Niles for that. That's really a good savings. I have to leave, I'm sorry, I have to go to the
You
zoning.
stole his thunder.
I've got to go to the zoning board. Sure.
One party to another.
If I may.
Thanks, Jerry.
We started the month with a request from the town to delay the first payment. We had 3 payments scheduled in May. And by the end of the month, they were all caught up. Everything was fine. So we're good with that. Regarding the manifest, we will be doing another check run on the 28th. We don't have a meeting scheduled, but just to get as much done before the end of June, so we're not carrying anything over. So we'll do another run that day. And we'll catch up with y'all there.
So, underneath the business report, I need a motion to accept the grant report of $7,500.
Motion to accept the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation grant of $7,500 to be used for percussion and entry fees and music in the parks.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, unfinished business, lead testing update.
Nothing back from the state. Checked with our vendor this morning, and he has emailed her directly again today and CC'd me on it.
Okay. And RFP for the retaining walls?
Patty uploaded it to your drive this afternoon. We only received that one bid, which is the same company that we had reached out to before. And I believe the price is actually a little cheaper than the one that we discussed in the winter. But it could be.
Gil, didn't we have somebody that was scheduled to come out and look and not a second one?
We had two people that were scheduled to come and
And they
look.
just never followed
And
up?
one of them was concerned that the RFP was written that the wall had to be built by August 19th, and I corrected them and said that was ideally our plan when we started this RFP in the winter. But they still didn't come out, which was required.
Yeah.
I don't know how they could give them. So we reached out to Vermont and New Hampshire engineers. I think we sent it to 8 different engineering companies to come out. So,
So,
what would be the next steps, I guess, that we would want to?
Well, that's what I was wondering, is this something where, because we only had one person absolutely follow through, do we go with that person, or should we resubmit or re-advertise for it?
We haven't advertised, have we?
Well, we
put
put
out-
out RFP out there.
Oh, we put the
That's what I meant, yeah.
RFP, but when you send out an RFP, you send it to designated
Right.
people. We haven't put a
We haven't
ad.
put an advertisement.
Yeah.
We sent it to everybody in the state of Vermont or New Hampshire that we could find a valid mailing address to.
Oh,
It
well,
does engineering studies, so other than, I guess, Maine, I guess technically would be the next closest state that we didn't reach out to.
okay.
And you've reached out, like you said, to the other one that was initially interested, that's,
And we have rescinded and then tried to get them to still come so we had something to compare it to.
So that's $13,800.
Okay.
Maybe we should send it to Maine, see what they have to say. I don't know.
So we have one that has
Right.
got back to us.
Actually followed through.
Followed through, we have one. With a price,
yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah. mhm.
and
This year.
the reason we're not acting on that is because we need to have more, and we can't get more people to react to it, to fit on.
Well, right, we reached out, Dale said he sent it out to every known company in Vermont and New Hampshire with a valid address and.
So when do you say I'll call and say,
Right, that's what I'm asking.
get the wall fixed?
That do we just go
Well,
with that one,
this is
or is there another
just-
process?
This is not fixing the wall.
Right, this is just determining what needs to be done, and then there'll be an estimate on that wall.
Yeah, okay, and we can't even get the estimate to be done. So why don't we try to go forward with that and be done with it tonight and get it done?
And where's the money coming from?
Good question, how much?
13.8.
What is that credit card, Dale? Kidding.
Won't be on my power.
Well then, if we don't have the money, why are we putting,
I don't know, I'm asking.
They'd have to come out of the capital fund. If we do it. Probably with an initial expenditure out of the general fund and see what we needed at the end of the year in 1920. With the idea that they may or may not ultimately have to come out of the capital fund.
very comfortable enough to do that.
Yeah, we can back it up with the capital reserve, that's fine.
We can?
It's not your life mission.
And then the actual project may end up having to be
The warrant
a
article.
warrant article
Yeah.
possibly,
Yeah,
or,
At least we have the study,
I
this
would
is a
like-
progress.
Which is a good reason to get going.
I'm for that.
All right,
So what does it come out of, equipment or maintenance?
We're thinking of repairs this one.
Repairs, okay.
And then if we need to go to the capital reserve fund, then that's a
Okay.
proposal.
no, if Dale hadn't sent it out to everybody in Vermont and New Hampshire, I think we'd have a reason to say we need to go to others, but, you know, if we did that, we did it consistent, and we only got back one response, we actually got back two, but only one showed to do it, then I think,
Yeah, I think we did the
other than going to Maine or
you don't need to
Massachusetts,
throw a wrench in it,
What's
I
the next
just didn't
step?
know what the
Right.
process was.
no. And Horizons is not the company that will be doing the work once we determine that, that would go to a whole different,
Right, they're just the engineer that's gonna do the study, and then part of the RFP would require them to work with the contractor.
Right.
That was selected, when we get to that phase.
Right.
But we gotta get phase 1 and 2 done.
Yeah.
Before we can get to the next phase. And maybe the study will come back and say, they can fix it with the walls as is, they need to do this, this, and this.
or, no, yeah.
We don't know that.
Yeah.
That's being optimistic.
That doesn't hurt.
No, it doesn't hurt.
And real quick, Dale, this is to assess the wall that's in the parking lot. Is it also to assess the wall behind the band room?
Yes.
Okay, so it's the whole wall on Oak Street,
So
both
basically,
sides of Oak Street.
it's not our side,
Or is it Maple or is it?
it's on Maple Street, but the one across the street on Oak Hill Ave.
No, but I
is
mean,
not ours.
but the one that's on, behind the band room,
Yes.
and then the one that is adjacent to, or
Like
right up against the cafeteria and the parking lot.
Yeah, both of the ones on our property that were put in the 2003 renovation.
Okay, I need a motion.
I'll make the motion that we go ahead and, get the name of it because it's on. Get in touch and start the process, not the wrong one. One of you help me out here. Go ahead and make the motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion
You
to,
got it in front of you, I don't have it.
I'll make a motion to move forward with Horizons
Thank
Engineering
you.
on the,
Study?
engineering study for the walls.
Okay.
It's the proposal for civil engineering studies, Littleton High School retaining walls, for the sum of 13,800, not to exceed 13,800.
Second.
Any further discussion?
What's that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry, I opened the wrong one.
That's okay.
Oh, yeah, we didn't, do we need to add in there where the funds are gonna come from?
no,
Okay.
not yet. We'll find out, we'll go in the hole.
All right.
Next item on the agenda, whoops. How to check posting service.
Okay, so I'll just switch hats. We'll go back to technology. So part of the state House Bill 1612 that passed and the data governance manual that you have in front of you, asks each school district to look into how their information is secured and backed up and so forth. And I don't doubt our system. I don't doubt the things that we have, but nothing is 100% secure anywhere. So Matt and I have been working with Tyler Tech. That's our accounting, budgeting, HR software that we use in the district. It's currently housed in-house in my little dungeon. And the backups are done there regularly, 3 times per day that we have. We have to transition away from the current server that it's on, so there's a fee of a minimum of $2,000 for them to migrate the data from our current server to an updated server, whether we store it in-house or whether we ask them to take the hosting fee. the purchase order is not finalized. The requisition has been in our accounting system since April 12th. So the cost to do the migration and for them to take over the hosting is $10,575. I've talked with Steve, which is why we're here. And then ongoing, it's around $7,900 per year for them to continue to host. The question that I would pose and that Matt and I would pose is if our data is breached, they're not coming after student records, they're coming after our accounting software, our employees' information, that's all on that site. If we do this, the liability transfers away from us as a school district to the company that's hosting it, similar to with Power School, if they were to ever have a breach with the students' information, we have a hosted service. So is the $8,000 per year worth that? That's not my decision. We think it is, because if we had a breach, who is anybody going to come to? Matt and I. It's our fault. So let's just, put a value on the information. I don't know how many employee records are necessarily in that, but you think of all the vendor records that are in that system, and the average cost per record, if our data is breached, is $250 to get that back and to secure that. So just say there's 1,000 records in there. That's $250,000 that we have to come up with to get our data back. And it's already happened to 3 different schools in this state. So do we want to be proactive or reactive? And that's what Matt and I were trying to be proactive.
Dale, what do you guys spend right now or currently for your hosting? I mean, you host it here, but is there expenses that you guys are paying right now that, if we're looking at this right now, we're talking 10,500, you said?
10,500, yeah.
Plus 8,000 annually. Are we spending anything now annually to do the same thing but local but here on site? I mean, is there expenses to what you're doing right now?
So our firewall is about $3,000 that we have to update yearly for licensing.
And this would cover that. This 8,000 would include that.
No, we still need that for the rest of our devices in the school system.
Okay, so what I'm asking, is there any shift of current dollars that you'd be shifting to this Tyler Tech? So this is a whole new expense that we're not currently even using any part of. Okay.
Correct. We currently pay Tyler Tech just to own their software, to use their software, around $12,000.
And we'll continue to pay that.
Correct.
Okay.
There would be some hardware savings perhaps, right?
Well, the server that's downstairs, it's null and void by, I think, July 19th is when Microsoft stopped supporting that operating system, the Windows Server 2008 that's on there. So yeah, we could possibly reuse the server, but it doesn't have any value. And there's no maintenance necessarily that costs us any money on that currently.
But we need to replace that and we'll stay the
Right,
way
so
we
what
are
would
or
we
not.
do if we didn't?
So we would have to purchase a license for Windows Server and SQL Server, as well as we still have to pay the $2,000 to $3,000 estimate for them to migrate the data to our server. So we probably would be looking at $5,000 to $6,000 for us to do what we have to do no matter what.
Yeah. So, but going this route, that includes that. So you're already looking at having to spend $5,000 to $6,000 versus $10,500, which would include the same thing. And then on top of that is the $8,000 annual maintenance or not maintenance, but fee for them to host.
Correct.
So if that's the case, we're looking at about $4,500 plus the $8,000. So $4,500 up front, because it's already going to cost us $6,000, is what I'm saying. That's a rough estimate. So we're looking at $4,500 plus the $8,000 annually.
Dale, Service 16 is good till 2027, I believe.
Yeah, I don't have an end date on that, but, and that's the thing, like if they host it, like we would never have to worry about upgrading.
Yeah, you had mentioned that in
software
the data you sent to us. Do you have again, Dale, I don't know if you've done this or if you have it in your head, roughly how much time you and Matt spend monthly doing updates, that is now going to be done by your host?
For just that server alone, it's probably 2 hours a week.
2 hours a week. So there's a cost associated with that too.
But
That's
it's
now,
not, the other thing is that we have to do it from home because we can't take the server offline during the day. So it's generally done it between 8 and 10 o'clock at night.
so there's a cost associated with that that now gets eaten up and gives back time or gives back home time that they normally wouldn't spend, but they're having to do from home.
So Tom, as the business manager, you're going to be dealing directly with this. How does this affect, I mean, pros, cons from your corner?
I'm old school. I'm not a fan of hosted services. Just like authority and you can delegate authority, you can't delegate responsibility. I still have a legal obligation to my data and to my employees' records regardless of where it's stored. Yeah, there might be some indemnity or whatever through Tyler, but it's still our data and we're still responsible for it. There's a lot of fiber and a lot of copper and maybe some satellite links between here in Plano, Texas. Not so much between here in the basement. We've been fortunate, we've only had 1 or 2 short failures with First Light. Unfortunately, they weren't during payroll days.
Okay.
But we can see a lot more miles and a lot more opportunity.
It's a mix.
The John Dillinger approach to why do you rob banks is because that's where the money is. If someone is going shopping, they're going to go against the server farm before they're going to come against me, I don't think. Most of what I would expect to have to defend against is going to be local. We had some scripts written a couple of years ago that did impact our system, but that was strictly local.
Dale, do you have something from Tyler Tech that outlines exactly what they will
Provide us?
cover
Correct.
in the case of a breach, and can we have copies of that?
I can send it along. It's already been shared.
Those were all my questions.
I mean, all I guess I would add is that, Matt and I are trying to do our due diligence.
Sure.
If our opinion, I'm not taking this disrespectful in any way, but if our opinion has to be coordinated with Tom's because he uses it, I'm not questioning Tom's intelligence. I'm not sure he knows as much as Matt per se on the back end of things. And so if we want to release the responsibility, if there was a data breach.
I think
And
my question was purely to the fact that Tom is the business manager, he has delegated that responsibility. So
Yeah, but
we
the
just need to make
question,
sure that
your question
everybody's covered.
was asked as, how would it affect him?
Right.
The answer is 0. He gave you his opinion
Mhm.
on what he thinks of that, but that it's not gonna impact his functionality whatsoever. That's. so-
Right, because I asked for his opinion.
Okay.
Right?
On the function, on how it would affect him.
Right.
It does not, is the answer, but he made it sound like it would if, a copper wire got affected between here and Texas. That's-
I mean, those are all things that we're all gonna take into consideration anyway, right?
Sure.
So.
Dale,
Wow.
what's the end date where you have to do the migration one way or the other?
I think it's July 19th.
And, if we were to table this till next meeting, hypothetically, and we tell you next meeting, we're a go, does that give you enough time to get Tyler Tech up and running for you to do that migration?
I believe your next meeting is July 15th, is that correct?
So we'd be cutting it very close.
I'm gonna say no, just because we were trying in April
Yeah.
to get booked for April vacation, and that was April 12th.
Okay,
And they were pretty full, and I'm sure they're busy. I mean, I will gladly ask them if they can.
I'm just curious if the board wanted more time to look at it, or we wanted more information from you, what is our time frame for us to still make this work if we move forward with it, and, or is this the night we have to make that decision, so. Okay.
Need more time.
And there's no extension on that July 19th deadline? Yeah,
From Microsoft.
okay. That's a Microsoft hard stop?
Yeah.
Okay. That was Windows
Server,
Server.
2008.
David, we have a sense of what other schools are doing.
We've talked to Colebrook and Pittsburgh here. They both use Tyler Tech hosted services. And have had no issues, but I guess the question that I would pose would be, what are the school districts that were breached? What are they doing now? And that could be, I mean, sure, there's two very large school districts in southern New Hampshire that we can reach out to and ask what they're doing now to protect their data after the fact.
Where were those, Dale, schools?
Concord School District
Concord.
and Manchester. Manchester had their W-2 still on, which was significantly
Mhm.
impacted.
So Bill, you said it was a minimum of $250 per account, could it be more?
That's the average for
Average.
educational records to be recovered, is $250.
Get out of this.
I'm fine with whatever, as long as we have all the information.
Do we have enough information, or would you like to have a quick meeting next week?
I didn't hear you, Ann, I'm sorry.
I said, do we want some more information? And maybe we could have a meeting sometime next week.
Well, let's.
Dale, are there other hosting options for us? Anybody that does the same things, but obviously isn't Tyler Tech, so I'm not talking converting what the services we're using with Tyler Tech, but is there other services out there that do the same type of hosting that we could kind of compare to quickly? I don't know if that's.
Sure, so we have our local company in the industrial park. That cost per month would be about $1,400 for them to do the same service, so
1,400, so well over 8,000 a year.
well, almost 17,000.
And that doesn't include the migration cost on top of that, but
Right.
Okay.
I'm on a bank, I should know what banks use, but I don't.
Probably encrypted software.
Back it up, huh?
Probably encrypted software.
Yeah,
Your drive.
Pretty sure.
That's you, yeah.
I know.
Who else? No information?
I mean, I know that this is, the hospital does something similar. They've got some stuff is hosted, some stuff is on site, depends on what it is in there.
Just a lot to cut.
Certainly a larger system.
Yeah.
And and what he's speaking of, the breaches are happening in every industry and
Yeah.
going after those pieces of data. Dale, I don't know that it's happening in education, but I know in healthcare, they have ransomware. Is this type of hosting system protecting against that type of attack too, that could ransom? And I don't know if ransom is even happening in education, but it certainly is in healthcare.
It is in the, I would have to look up the school district in New Hampshire where their data was completely compromised and held captive without Bitcoin, was a ransomware attack. And that all stems from within. Like a ransomware attack happens because somebody sent you something or fished for something, and an employee in our district activated.
Opened it up, yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times emails have gone out that look like they're somebody else to staff members. And, you fill this out and I'll give you $250. And how many employees actually will fill that out thinking it's legit? But that's all that it takes from an internal source.
So this type of hosting will help protect even further from
Absolutely,
that.
yeah, because it's not here.
And that's what I was asking, was that would,
Actually, that happened this year. There was an email that went out to everybody at Lakeway asking them to meet me first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So I had every teacher in their room.
Oh,
They're coming to
wow.
look at me, they're in trouble, and I had no idea what they were talking
And
Is
about.
this somewhat insulated?
just in case.
Using Chromebooks?
What's that?
Isn't that somewhat insulated using Chromebooks?
Much more,
Because
absolutely,
the
yeah, because
operating system is-
there's less hassle. And this is the only software or service that we would recommend hosted.
Because it has all of that, it has the W-2 information, it has
Has every
all your
employee,
accounts, all your,
every past employee since 2007 is on that server.
and I can tell you from the ransomware in healthcare, Littleton is attacked always, but hasn't been hit, knock on wood, yet. But I was at a conference in Nashville last year talking with a hospital that was hit once with ransomware, and then 6 months later, the same company hit them again, and 6 months after that, hit them again. And the reason why is, once they're in, you pay the ransom, doesn't mean they let go. They can touch you anytime they want. So they waited 6 months and they hit them again, and that hospital has been hit 3 times by the same group. Can't get away from it. They just have to pay the ransom to free up their data. So it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that they're paying. So, they've got things in place now to protect it from happening again, but this company's in there.
Can't
They
find the
can't defend
culprits.
against that one because it's already got what they need. So, in my mind, I knew this was coming years ago, that we were gonna eventually get to this, the need for this. So I'm not surprised that Dale's here asking for it. And I certainly understand Tom's thoughts and his opinion and his concerns. Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest part, is it's all money. And where's the money gonna come from? But if we get hit, where's the money come from then too? So it's an
Like
insurance,
insurance,
it's an
yeah.
insurance plan is what it is,
There is provision within your general liability insurance now also.
that will cover that.
Yeah, this, we couldn't have got this far without having some
That
protection,
was added a couple of years ago.
right?
But it won't be $25 million like one hospital in California.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, we are protected somehow.
That's
Dale?
coverage.
Well, I think what Tom's talking is we're protected financially through an insurance policy, but the question is our data protected? And it sounds like they're doing their best to protect it with the means that they have now, but there's better protection out there. Is that a simplified way of putting it, Dale?
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, nobody's 100% secure.
Even this would not be 100% secure.
Exactly.
One of the counties in Florida outsourced their payroll.
Yeah.
It was $2.5 million a couple of weeks ago. Well, their direct deposits were sent someplace else. And that's with an outside service, the larger payroll services.
I mean, to me, the only hesitancy, I can't talk right now, is the money to pay for it. I mean, if we were, it'd be an easy choice.
So it sounds like the money's already encumbered in the technology budget, is that what I'm reading?
It has been.
Oh, it is.
So, I'm basically just asking for permission because as Dr. Niles and I talked, it's above his authority. So,
So you have it encumbered in the budget already?
currently covered.
Oh, I didn't know that, okay.
Sorry, I missed that.
I missed that too, kind of important.
This year, we just gonna get like 8,000 more each year after that.
Right,
Yeah,
and you budgeted for the first year of the 8,000, Dale?
First year would be the money that's already encumbered. It wouldn't start
Right.
until whenever they did.
10,575,
Yep, would come out of the current year's
okay, that's
technology
budget,
budget, which would cover us through the 1920 budget, and then starting in
7,900.
our next budget season, I would I would have to incorporate that.
Okay, so this 10,500 covers our first year of hosting as well?
Correct.
Okay, sorry.
And then you would put the 7,900 going forward in your budget.
Yes. Keeping in mind that we also saved about $6,000 with our internet service providers for starting for next
Yeah.
year, so there's already, it's not a lot. but We're gonna have to find this, without,
I'm good moving forward.
I'm good moving forward. Sorry, I misunderstood. I was more concerned about how we were going to finance it, but everybody else taking care of that, so. Good go on me.
Okay. I need a motion.
Go for the big boy.
No, add it up.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, it's the, well, I voted right here.
Okay.
This is in his budget, this isn't going forward, but this is computer tech.
So I'll make a motion to move forward with Tyler Tech hosting service, which includes in this current school year, Dale, to correct me if I'm making this wrong, the current school year, the cost of migration and hosting of 10,575
Sorry, I scribbled.
with future annual costs starting in 2021 of $8,000
79.
or $7,900,
Yes.
Oh, 79.75.
$7,975.
Yeah, second.
Any further questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
thank you.
Sorry about the confusion. Thank you for looking out for us, Dale.
I'm
Next,
not gonna be here forever, so.
next thing on the agenda is the school town MOU regarding the use of school facilities, parks and recreation. And I think this is just to show the board, FYI, can you want to speak about it?
It's just that we've had, how many meetings? 5 meetings?
5 or 6?
Meetings with Chris Wilkins and Andy Dorsett to discuss a mutually beneficial agreement, and everyone has been very amenable to that. And so what's on the drive is basically a first draft. There's some language that Chris on the Parks and Rec side has requested be in that agreement that's highlighted in yellow. And as soon as it's okay with the board, he will forward it to the commissioners and the town for their input. So it may come back another time or two, but just so you know where we stand with this.
Thank you for doing that.
Everybody getting along,
Trying to get that done for our.
being happy.
So, if everybody's done looking at that, data governance
Excuse
panel.
me.
Bless you.
Okay.
Everybody seen the data governance manual?
I don't see that one.
It's not on the drive because I have
What?
changes the other day. Okay, well, what? Did you have changes the other day? Yep, I didn't have that to put on the drive.
Okay. So,
Did you have a chance to look at the changes?
briefly, I think,
No, it looked good. The Dale, we met as a policy committee with the data governance manual, and Dale, and yeah, it was fun. And Dale and Steve were both making changes as we went through. A lot of it was just simple, like comma, and spelling out all of those acronyms.
we had a field day.
I did.
We did.
We did. Poor Dale. But it looked, at the last read, when Dale, you made those corrections and forwarded, it looked good. Was tired though.
Yeah, the technology committee did a lot of work,
Yes.
and Dale, of course, and Matt, and I said, the committee, so thank you very much.
It's really good.
Well done.
So I think if Patty, you can get the changes, then
Somebody could send them to me.
Yeah, they're very minor. Dale can send it.
yeah, after she.
You guys should also have it in your personal drive.
Yeah, I think it's
I'm
on
gonna
the
share it
email.
with you,
I was gonna say,
so
when you asked, I thought.
all the edits were made in there.
I just read.
I will
Just cut out the middleman.
Everybody forgets me all the time.
So we need board action to approve it, so Dale can send it to the state.
Right.
So, I need a motion.
You guys okay with that? Going forward, knowing that there have been eyes on it?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the data governance manual as presented this evening to the policy committee.
Yes. EMJB dash I believe. 40 pages of it.
Okay.
What she said.
First reading.
Okay.
I did second it
Okay.
once.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is Granite North TV. So,
Okay, two things there. The first one's the payment of donations, in your folder. We do have a list of individuals as well as a few organizations that made donations to, at that time was Channel 2, which has since become the Granite North. Kind of I don't know how to describe exactly how maybe Tom can describe better how the money came before. And what I think the best thing to do with it going forward, to go ahead.
Apparently there had been an account that was used by Bob previously, that was maintained here with our employee at Unibrook. I got a call from the bank a couple months ago, said, "You've got a stale account, what are we gonna do?" And I said,
Dormer.
yeah.
Bless you.
Anyway, we worked back through it, since Mr. Smith was one of the an authorized signature on the account, so he closed it, gave us the funds. And we deposited the funds as sundry income, but if you choose to satisfy the request from Granite North, then we've got the funds.
So if you remember Channel 2, patrons used to, when Bob O'Connor ran it, used to run ads. There's a cost for that. Sending money, the money went into this account. And periodically, if any money was spent from that account, it was created on equipment. So there was a balance in that account for a number of years that was dormant, so that's why we do some of it.
So we closed it out and put it where?
I took it into sundry income.
How much money are we?
The amount he's got there plus, $10 or $15 of accrued interest.
Yeah, a little over 2,000. That's the list
About
there.
2000, and this was in 2017 when it was agreed to, and one was agreed
That's
to
what
January 2nd of 18.
Oh, okay.
So,
And we'll be able to like
I
make
I
contact.
will talk to, not everybody, I talked to some.
And
Steve works it out.
Yeah, the idea was to support public television.
Yes.
Yeah, they did get, at least
they got some advertising
They got some
Okay.
advertising.
Okay, that's what I did with that. Okay, so,
services.
okay.
So your next step is what?
Authorized payment of. Authorized tell them to pay that amount or back over to Granite North. So out of our books then.
Do you need a motion for that or just consensus? Or neither?
Not really.
but
Not objection.
Not objection, not
It's in the
objection.
manifest.
Objection to that.
I mean, it's in the manifest, you signed off on the manifest.
Really? It says you.
I mean,
You can always cross it out in initial, and then change your mind.
No.
right.
All right,
No, that's
so we
fine.
can do that, whatever.
And then we'll get our equipment back.
Yes, which is not a lot of items.
Okay.
Which would be- yeah,
Do we have a list of what
We do.
we do, don't we? Because I remember that coming up. You don't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
so,
great.
yeah,
So
we're the
we
boys.
give this over to him, when he's gonna give us any equipment that he has as ours.
Right,
It's okay to remember your.
and Al did send me the list of equipment.
I don't know. I'll have to do.
Can we use it in the program?
I'm sure we will some.
Oh,
This is what,
I should go do that.
one, XF100 camera, 2 Daiwa tripods, 1 condenser mic kit. And, those are the items that he still has, or Channel 2 is using now, Brandon North TV.
So did we make a motion?
As to what?
The continuation of work.
Yeah,
To the next
for the next
question.
one. Yeah, the next one is a continuation of work with Granite North TV. And, I'll put that on, it's on the agenda. I think we've seen our costs go up and up and up. I think at one point, Tom, what we were budgeting around 10, 12,000 a year for it.
We added to it.
And now we're about 20. A lot more events are being added, and the configuration has been that it's split equally among the town, the hospital, and the school, which is fine. I think we certainly want to communicate with the public and support events, but I think there comes a time as we struggle through our budgets and we have to scrutinize everything very carefully. We've been able to start publishing our meetings on the website. And, I think that it's up to the board whether you want to continue to go forward in some fashion or to discontinue the association that we've had for the past, I don't know how many years out.
With Channel 2.
Yeah, long time.
With Channel 2.
Because we have no formal agreement in place with Granite State North, correct?
No, not with Granite
Aside
State.
from the check. It's a signed piece of paper.
We just kind of been continuing with what we've been doing. So the board, if the board feels that if you want to do this now, we can, this is one we can certainly put off if you want, if you want more time, we can certainly invite representatives of Granite North End to talk to us if you want to do that. It's kind of up to you.
Dale, on the website with the meetings, you can see how many people have viewed it, right?
Yep.
I wonder, have you looked at the Facebook page? Have you compared?
So, we looked at it just before the meeting tonight, Billy and I. Meetings that are like 7 months old.
Yeah.
Have less than 15.
Thank you for
20 views.
remembering that. I asked
You're
him to
welcome.
remember because I wouldn't.
Since we started posting it, the lowest number of views we have is 71 in the last month, as high as 688 views.
Look at that, 600.
Off of our website?
Yes.
That was the Lakeway parade though, so.
Oh.
You're welcome.
Well, I mean, that tells the tale right there.
Yeah,
And
and the interest,
what are we broadcasting on Granite State in the last year?
All of our meetings, a few school events, concerts.
Nothing to deliberative.
oh, that's on now.
Budget hearing deliberative.
in a
Do we-
timely fashion.
Too late.
And do it, and maybe you answered this already, maybe I missed it, because I did hear a number of 15 thrown out, but do we know how many people view that? Do they have that feedback?
No, not via, they've been
Like the
publishing.
Nielsen
on-
ratings for,
They have been publishing our meetings on YouTube, with their YouTube channel. We can see the views there, but, we have no idea what,
that's Granite State that's putting it on a YouTube channel?
they work.
Yeah, so we could do the same thing.
But we have no data on usage on 13 or 1310. The cable.
You know, in the interest of clean, trying to be conservative with the budget and having improved our own ways of getting things filmed, and I'm really not in favor of continuing. I'll put it out there.
I guess the question is, do we give them an opportunity? That's what you asked, right? Do we give them an opportunity to come in and talk to us and change our mind, or do we just want to cut the?
I'm okay with having a meeting with them or a presentation.
Oh,
But my only concern is if we cut it, then there may be some seniors in our community that do not have internet, right, that rely on this as their source to get information about our schools and our meetings and our deliberative sessions, and that don't have the ability to go onto our website.
Right.
Or to go onto YouTube. That would be my only concern.
Okay, but they
the
need to
question
be
is-
on there.
But the question is,
Yeah.
you know, would they rather us spend the money each year to have it available to them, or do they have enough value out of it? So,
With the cable changes, I've had
Yeah.
a number of calls here, they can't find it.
Right.
which is, I've heard that as well.
Just looking at the Facebook page where a lot of it's posted, anything that's school related, if we got 4 likes, 2 views, 26 views. So even those numbers are
Lower
pretty
than our own.
low,
They're lower than our own.
lower than what we're doing, what Dale's doing.
So that would be my only concern, which would be the only reason why I would want to meet with them, so that they could explain to us. But,
Explain to us their timing.
no, I
Or
just, well,
if they have a plan to improve,
right.
how they're handling it right now.
Otherwise, no, I'm not really in favor of it either, but I don't want to just, I don't know, my concern is if we discount that, it takes away from our. No, we're trying to be transparent to our community, and we're taking away one source of transparency to somebody to a group of citizens that may not have access to the internet, may not have access to YouTube. And that would be the only thing I'd be concerned about. And maybe it isn't enough of a concern, I don't know. But I don't know if they have a way to tell us that. I don't know if they have data that they can present to us that says their viewership and I don't know that.
I have asked for that.
And they may be more concerned
You
about
have
trying to lower the tax
They
rate.
they might be,
That's $20,000 out of our budget.
they might be, absolutely. That's why I'm not against
No, okay, all right.
at all.
But I will have to-
Yeah, that's well extended.
Well, and
Attend the next meeting.
You know, the question is, I mean, if it's taking $60,000 hypothetically to run this, from 20 from the town, 20 from the hospital, 20 from school, are we getting our $20,000 worth? Or is the majority of that coming from town programming or hospital programming or dead air, or just repeat of the same stuff over and over?
I don't know.
That's kind of the questions I'd like to ask them, is to,
We're paying for the school-specific programming,
okay,
and then we're sharing the general program.
okay.
So like Christmas parades and Chamber of Commerce meetings and things like that. I presume the hospital has them.
That's my third.
I personally haven't watched Channel 2 or Granite State since it probably,
I
Was
equally
Channel 2.
suspect that the town has some of their own unique programming, and again, then we just share the other items.
so my question is, you know, my concern is, are we paying for more than what we're
Yeah,
getting value out of?
so it sounds like
I'm
we
glad to
should-
listen to it.
I think we know the answer, but
I do too, I just would like to,
I'll take care of that.
all right, so thank you.
I think that's good.
All right.
We know how to beat an issue to death tonight, don't we?
Let's see, I think, Kelly, you're on.
Yeah, I just had, end of year enrollment and, broken out by disabilities and how many evaluations were conducted over the year. I don't know if you have specific questions about any of that.
So, yeah, that was good, Kelly.
Yeah, I think I did ask the ad staff to kind of keep this section a little shorter tonight.
Yeah, I saw it.
In view of the, we had a front-loaded hour presentation.
You get two positions open?
Yeah, 2 para positions and we're looking to, conduct interviews Thursday.
Excellent.
Oh, good.
I didn't know there's 2 open. Okay,
Thanks, Kelly, for evaluations.
Yeah, part of the
okay,
Jen's on.
Jennifer.
So we have openings, a math teacher, I didn't put it in my report, but since we're brought it up, athletic director, teacher, and long-term sub for social studies. That we're looking at working on, we've got interviews scheduled this week. I just wanted to do some highlights. We, at our class night, gave out 114 scholarships totaling $326,000, thanks to the Littleton community, and some of the funds available to our graduates. Berry Transportation, again, donated the bus service for our seniors to take their last trip to Lakeway in their caps and gowns. That was moving.
Yeah, it was
There's
cool.
a great video.
I think that's
It was-
cool.
Thanks to Alex for the video.
Alex
Yeah.
did.
Alex edited.
Lowe's donated the flowers and the flower pots in front of the high school for the event, so thanks to Lowe's. And I don't know if you have questions about anything else. Crusader Pride, again, donated the jackets for our new athletes. That's
And the
short and
Memorial
sweet.
Day celebration, that was really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Memorial Day
Yeah.
celebration. Joe DePalma was a guest speaker. That was nice to see a senior being asked to speak at that event. It's not often students are included in that. And our students with the music and the reads, students from the elementary school straight up through the high school, middle school.
I thought the whole week of festivities, the 2 weeks, went really well. I thought they were all well done. What's that on?
Alan?
All right, so as, I'll just go over these quickly. As you can see, I've attended a number of meetings, and the concern has been about the skilled workforce. One kind of coming from the town, discussing what we could do in terms of STEM, really K through 16, if you will. And then I attended another meeting at White Mountain Community College where industry partners were there, and you see them listed: Newman Wire, Burndy, Rodebeck, NSA, Industries, and Genfoot. Really concerned about the skilled workforce. Fortunately, there's a nice presentation from Jim Casey representing the New Hampshire Apprenticeship Program. So they've done a lot of work to support a lot of these businesses. Articulation agreement, been working with Keene State. This is quite exciting. So a student who completes 2 years of a program, if they go to Keene, of course, we can earn up to 8 college credits for that work in high school.
That's great.
That's awesome.
And I just wanted to mention junior Naomi Nunez, and I have her permission to bring her up to this meeting. And I did present a flyer from Dartmouth Hitchcock, high school internships. These are paid internships. So there's over 120 students that applied to be involved in this paid internship. We actually had 2 students apply from Littleton, both in Health Science 1 as juniors. She tells me that 45 students were interviewed and she was selected. So
Wow.
she
That's awesome.
is traveling 3 days a week to Dartmouth to participate in this paid internship. It's quite
That's
exciting.
awesome.
Congratulations.
Two days.
in the neurology department as well, so she's,
The what, neurology?
that's her career goal, so.
That's so good.
So just let you know, professional development over the summer, things we've talked about before, trying to get more Project Lead the Way courses. So one of our instructors, Nathan Reed, will be attending Introduction to Engineering Design. That will enable him to teach that high school class. Some other courses on PD, and Mr. Anderson will be attending a week coding, trying to beef up our coding opportunities for students. And it wasn't on your report, but our completer ceremony, we had 60 completers this year. Originally thought it was 58, but it was 60. And just let you know that students were engaged in third-party assessments, which we're required to do. Just give you a little breakdown of what they're really taking for courses. You know, CPR, we have 38 students certified. Of course, you've heard about the LMA. New one this year is ASA Auto. So students passed, and one student went on and passed, was able to receive 6 certifications. The other list is our precision exams that we were able to have access to for free from the state. So they have purchased a package that next year is no longer available. So if we use precision, we can use them in a number of areas. That's something that'll probably be written in the Perkins. Really for the whole high school and the CTE, it's about $4,500 to have the full bank of assessments. And you can tell teachers are really buying into that with pre and post assessment. So it's good to see how well the students are doing on this third party assessment. And then that's it.
Dale?
Facilities meeting, nothing in July, August 2nd. Repairs to the swings per Primex investigation or inspection last year have been made, so thank you to Alex. And then just on a side note, our championship team was invited to the Fisher Cats game tomorrow night, courtesy of Coca-Cola.
Cool.
So just to thank you, we have the majority of the team attending and family. And there's a parade on the field before the game for the kids. So
That's cool.
that's it.
Okay, Crystal?
There isn't too much new stuff on there, really just a big vendor celebration that I listed in there. The senior video, I wasn't sure if everybody had seen that, so I linked it there. It's always super popular. So thanks to Jen and the seniors for coming down, and Dale and Alex for videoing that for us. 6th grade step up was a huge success. I'm pretty sure the gym was packed. And we had 2 staff welcome babies this month, so congrats to the Copp family and the Champagne family.
Aw, nice. I just saw 2 names, I went
Lots of
Charlie and
names.
Kate, and I went.
I know. Charlie, Kate, Champagne.
I was gonna call right up.
And we have currently 42 students fully registered for kindergarten. We have 6, I think it's 6 that aren't completed, and a few packets that have gone out, so we can have a solid kindergarten.
Okay. Mr. Nova?
That'll be quick. You guys have the
Oh, no, you have to stay a long time. This is right.
You can drag it out, no problem. I've passed along, I think it is, it's somewhere there, so everybody should have a copy of that. It's double-sided, so you can see the sports fair participation and just kind of a summary of how they did competitively this year. It was a real successful season. I'm really proud of all of our student athletes and the work that they've done this year. Greg and I actually used quite a bit of restorative justice with the student athletes this year and a little bit last year. I was trained on it last year. And it works really well, implementing it to the athletic piece and the athletic consequences that those kids have to face. So it was a good thing. We've got a few seniors that are going to be competing at the collegiate level in different athletic events. So, you know, proud of the work that they've done over the years to get to that point. So, as far as work I've been doing, last few years, working on kind of a coach's handbook and different policies to help the athletic department run a little bit more smoothly. I haven't gone as far as I would have hoped, but I've got 20, 25 pages down that I'll be definitely sharing with Jen, which she can have, and the next athletic director can do. Yeah.
Okay.
Questions?
David, thank you for your work here the past 2 years. Wish you all the very best.
Yes, we all do.
We appreciate what you did.
Thank you, appreciate that. And personally, I, would like to reciprocate that, and I'm thankful for everybody in this room for trusting me and supporting me over the past years. I appreciate all of the work you do for this community.
Good luck to you.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
Okay, Melanie.
My report pretty much just closes out the school year with the wrapping up of testing and where we'll be going with professional development, what we're doing now, and then what we'll be doing this summer and then into next year. Where I really wanted to focus was the Renaissance Star 360, which Steve, I believe you said that you had mentioned to them.
Yep, they've had the packet.
Was it this packet? Okay, and then through my report, you can access the some slides that I'm going to speak to briefly. The process that led us here began with the Title I and special education team at Lakeway. And we really wanted to find some assessment and intervention products that could help us drill down to detailed guiding skills that students had to help us deliver targeted interventions to those students. And through research, we came upon a couple products that we had participated in some webinars and quickly decided to focus in on Renaissance Star 360. And so the Lakeway team had participated in the webinar. Middle school team participated in another webinar. And then we had an admin team discussion about making the switch from using the NEWA assessment to using the STAR 360 suite of assessments. And then we brought Dale in to talk about budget and feasibility. And then kind of the last piece of that journey was today, where we had a discussion with all the educator stakeholders. So all the teachers at Lakeway, as well as the teachers at the middle school and high school that would be using this suite of assessments. Just to make sure that everyone, all the teachers that would be using it were on board with this switch. And we had a majority of support today, for sure. There were definitely some questions and a little bit of apprehensive from a couple, but the majority of the teachers were on board and were excited. So the suite of assessments has 5 components. STAR Early Literacy, STAR Reading, and STAR Math, which each assess skills across a variety of domains in their respective subject areas. STAR Custom supports formative assessments for pre-K to 12. And STAR Spanish allows for side-by-side comparison of students' understanding in both English and Spanish. On the second slide there, you can see that one of the big pluses that teachers really liked is that you can assess your students in 20 minutes, whereas the NEWA assessment that we take now takes at least 45, if not an hour, if not 2+ days for some students to complete that assessment.
One student?
Yes. So there's a few different components with the assessment piece in this suite of assessments. Actually, let me back up.
The assessments help educators take the guesswork out of teaching by identifying specific skills. You can get much more detailed information than you can with the NEWA assessment. And then you can determine where the students are and where they need to go to next. Planning time is streamlined by matching the skills the students are ready to work on with hundreds of free instructional resources and intervention and extension resources tied to different skills. And then additionally, teachers can choose from hundreds of different skill checks or create their own skill checks to address the students' custom plans. There are universal screeners and progress monitoring screeners. The universal screeners are what would replace what NEWA is doing for us now. It is an assessment that's given to students at each grade level. And the assessment starts with a question that is at that grade level, and how the student answers on that helps the assessment determine whether or not they're going to continually give more difficult questions or easier questions. And then that, at the end of that, it determines a baseline to track student achievement. And reports can be generated based on school, district, or state benchmarks. And teachers can quickly identify students meeting the benchmarks and then those needing additional support and intervention. There's also a goal setting tool, so teachers can help students, well, actually, the program will determine a personalized goal for each student. And based on their performance on the universal screener, and then teachers can determine the best interventions and correct allocation of school and district resources that would be needed. Teachers also have the discretion to change those individual student goals as they see fit. If a student is not trending towards meeting their goal, they could lower that goal a little bit so that the student finds more success. Or the opposite, if the student is meeting their goal ahead of schedule, they could raise that goal to challenge the student a little bit more. The progress monitoring helps measure students' individual growth. Each student's STAR assessment results are plotted on the progress monitoring report. And when students complete 3 assessments, a black trend line will indicate where the students are in relation to their goals. So as teachers are implementing the recommended interventions or extensions, they can see if they're working by looking at that trend line, and if they are, keep on with that, on that path, and if they're not, they can switch it up. And let's see. We can also use this to determine students' projected performance on the state summative test for both the New Hampshire State Assessment and the SAT. And knowing this in the fall can help teachers put the appropriate interventions in place to help students make more growth towards proficiency. And these learning progressions are aligned to state-specific learning standards and use focus skills to hone in on the most critical skills students need to learn. And then lastly, the ESOL piece. The assessments can be administered in both Spanish and English, which helps teachers determine whether any deficiencies are due to language barriers or are due to a bigger learning issue.
Thank you. That's a lot.
Are there questions from the board? I am gonna ask the board to consider making this change. There will be with everything we talked about tonight, it's just money. There will be some money differential.
But not much.
It's minimal.
Yeah,
So we're cutting out 2 programs to add this one.
Yeah, we reevaluated all of our programs at Lakeway to sort of streamline it for Dale, so we've been talking about this for the whole year.
Yep. So, and I think to get it going and to get it planned out well, I would ask the board to consider making this, or to approve our request to make the change. Once all your questions have been asked about the program itself and certainly the finances.
There
Well,
is a
how many
professional
elements?
development piece added with this, so they would provide some training for us, either on-site or webinar.
It's webinar, so, within the quote, there is an onboarding, piece that's free with starting the program, and then we would also have, 4 virtual, professional development sessions where the topic is determined by us. So if we determine we want more, professional development, around, the student growth piece, or setting the goals, or if we want more professional development around reading the reports, or using the interventions, we get to determine what those topics will be.
So Melanie, the charge I had for the webinars, how much were those? Do you remember?
Webinars.
Because I figured roughly,
So for all of the professional development was 1,800.
that's what I thought, around 2,000.
Mhm.
So help me out here. This is a work in progress, but just to give you the numbers, the cost of and we've had several different proposals, make sure we're all on the same page here. The cost of the program is 16,000. Round numbers, 15,996, right?
Correct, because
Okay.
wrapped into, the quote that we have is a little bit more, but wrapped into that is accelerated reader, which is something we
We're
already
already
have
paying,
anyway.
right. So the net cost is about 16,000.
Correct.
NWEA right now, we're spending 8375.
Yep, and we had more than that actually budgeted.
So Mel and I worked at the beginning of the year, because it doesn't expire till November.
Right.
So at the beginning of the year, we lowered, with Mel's approval, the number of licenses.
Yeah,
We actually budget $10,000 for.
Yep, okay. So there's actually 10,000 in the budget, but our expenditures this last year is 8375. That leaves us 7619. If we pay for roughly 2,000 of the staff development that Mel mentioned, I think we can, that clearly will qualify Title II. So that gets the added cost, if you will, down to about 5,500.
Yes. Accelerated reader.
Right.
That's already
That's
factored
already
in.
out.
That's
But
already
with
factored in.
with the programs that we're not renewing,
Mhm.
that, some of that was already made up,
Yeah.
according to Dale.
Right.
We're getting it.
So that's the net cost, as I said in, my memo, about 5,500, which I think is, our recommendation to approve it.
It's less than 55, just trying to get that number.
Yeah.
Say that again?
It's less, the difference will be less than 55, because we went through all of our other digital learning
Yeah, there
sites
may be
and shared down just.
a few other things that I didn't have access to.
Dale's looking at that number right now.
I always like to come in a little higher than it be lower than the other way around. As far as what's in the budget, there's, what's in the budget will,
Next year's budget?
next year's budget, yeah.
Yeah, so we also cut out a program called Essential Skills, which was budgeted for $2,000 next year, so.
So it'll have negligible effect on the published budget, the 10,000.
Yeah. I know that we've had this for a couple of weeks, and they've given it to us at different points, and I know that a lot of time and research has gone into this. The money is great, that it's all been worked out,
Right.
but in light of what we're just absorbing from test scores,
Mhm.
I'd really like to see a plan first.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? We're getting.
Well, this
hit
is
on all
part of the plan we
sides.
presented at the beginning of the year, that we were going to be looking for an opportunity that would
different
meet our
assessment.
needs, and this is what we found. So in order for us to get really honed in on the skills that are lagging or the gaps in the learning,
Right.
we needed a site that was more suited for that, so that our interventions could be better suited, so that our, overall learning would be improved. NELA does not provide that with us now, so
Right.
to continue with that would be doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So this is the site that a team of people has determined is our best bang for our buck, that will give us more interventions. Interventionists will have, Title I special ed will have access to this information, and that will drive where they do their instruction to help those kids that are behind, fill in those gaps. So this is part of the plan we presented in the fall, when we talked about how we are going in, our goal is to increase test scores. So this is sort of at the culmination of the year, looking into what we can do and what we can find. So we did present the plan in the fall, and this is sort of where we ended up with our decision making.
Right.
So it's like one leg of the train here.
And what this suite of assessments does is it gives us, what we're missing right now is the formative piece that we can use throughout the school year. We have summative data. We don't have the formative data that can inform our instructions throughout the year. And right now what we have is we see how we're doing with NEWA in the beginning of the year. We see how we're doing at the end of the year. But we haven't put, we're missing the pieces that can help us make those necessary changes mid-year.
Right.
So.
And I don't think any of us are in doubt of that. I mean, what was put together was great. I think that the problem that we face as a board is that we're given information a week or two ahead of time and then told this is coming, and then it's here with no other information.
Well, just like our site Reflex, which is a parent email, it takes us an entire year to get everybody sort of vetted in there, get trial sites, get them in there, get them pre-trained to try things out. And really, we had to do that with a few sites before we could settle in on one and then really hone in on that.
And Crystal, I'm not saying that this isn't great and that we're not going to do it. I think we're all just wanting like another couple of weeks to the next board meeting so that we could fully absorb it. And at least that's the
Well, I was
impression that I'm
thinking-
getting.
If you present us this early in the fall, since you're gonna be looking at this,
That will be too late because we have to train.
No, she's saying you did, that you
Oh,
presented
yes.
that whole.
What we
yeah.
were-
I would like an executive summary prior saying we started this last fall with this, and this is what we've done. And this is what we're presenting. Because it would make it more clearer to the board and more factual, I believe.
Crystal, did I hear you say that you, and maybe I misheard, did you have some teachers kind of using this in
Yes.
a beta kind of sense?
So we got a trial license, I don't know how many, just a couple tried it. We actually had somebody administer the Spanish and the English version of the assessment. We had our interventionists complete the webinar and go through that. We had a couple teachers log in. So it's kind of like what we did with the Reflex math. Before we make a huge financial decision, we want to make sure that we have buy-in and that it's providing us what we need. We know that NEWA is not providing us what we need. So we get to the beginning and the end of the year, and then you pass the kid along to the next year, and it's, you're starting over with that information. The big piece that we're missing from our interventionists, which if you remember back to the fall, we've been back for actually 2 falls ago. We're at 2 math and 2 ELA interventionists instead of 3 ELA and 1 math. So that was part of the bigger plan. But this year, the Title I SPED PLC, their focus was how are we providing interventions. So for example, if you have a group of kids in a reading group because they're reading out of level H, some are reading out of level H because of fluency and some are reading out of level H because of comprehension. So this tool will help us to better determine where kids are at and what their weakness is. So it helps us with grouping and it also helps us with individual interventions along the way throughout the school year because the smaller assessments are very short. So you can do quick spot checks to see where a child is and see if what you're doing is working or if what you're doing is not. We don't have that tool right now. So we're relying on beginning and end of year assessments and some assessments throughout the year, but nothing that's quickly accessible to interventionists and classroom teachers and paras, because we have a lot of paras that we train to provide interventions. We don't have that tool right now. So as part of our bigger plan, last fall, I presented that we need a better tool. And this is the tool that our team and the middle high school team has determined will best fit our needs. And it is a learning curve. Anytime you try something new, there's going to be some, you need that training piece along with it. So it's not going to be a correct all by the end of November, the first time we take an assessment. But as we learn, so this provides us with recommendations for interventions, which we will match with what we have in existence at Lakeway. We've already done sort of an inventory of what do we have for tools, and then this this site, this program will help us determine which ones will be the most appropriate for an intervention.
So can I add on to my question? So you had a couple of teachers, and however many teachers you kind of had, in my mind, they were kind of like doing the beta
Yeah.
test of it. They did it for the year.
Spot check.
Did you have another group of teachers doing a different, like a competitor program to it?
Well,
Or
what we did as an admin team, me, Jen, Steve, I don't remember, it was so long ago now. We sort of went through what was available that would meet our needs, and we went through, one of them was so financially not even in the wheelhouse. We looked at 3 big ones.
Okay,
One was financially not in the wheelhouse, it was so significantly more than the others that we weren't sure. So we kind of narrowed it down to the other 2, and I believe they did webinars on both. One huge piece of this decision-making was, this one has an ESOL component, the other one did not have an ESOL component.
and the teachers that did use this one as well as, did they also use the other one?
We did not go to that next level
Okay.
with that one.
So the teachers that did use
They
this
had
program,
the capability to go to a dummy site
Okay.
set up, so they could go in and play around, but they didn't have the capability to enter in their own students.
that was what I was gonna ask you,
They
were they
had
able to track even a small sample of students to see if they showed improvement, if they showed success, and so that you weren't
We did
able
not
to
do
do through
that.
this part?
So what we felt were features of the other program, there were some features of the other program that we liked, but the ones in this program far outweighed for us. For me, the biggest piece was ESOL. We don't have a tool that is across languages for an assessment like this right now, and that was a big piece for me. And the other piece for me really was providing those interventions right out of the gates. And then really the other one was the timing. NEWA is painful for some kids. And 2 or 3 days, you're not getting the best score from that kid. And the information that we get from NEWA does not provide us with what we actually need from those assessments.
So does STAR 360 provide kind of a ballpark estimate of the amount of time you're gonna spend testing using their product versus the amount of time you've spent testing using NEWA, and what that returns to classroom instruction in time?
I don't think they compare themselves to other.
Because it sounds to me like if this is
They
more
provide
efficient use of time,
Yeah, they
correct?
provide a ballpark time of how long the universal screeners take.
Yes.
And we know from experience how long NEWA takes.
And I
we
think, Jen, did you send out a principal's email? And there are several other school districts in our area, Bethlehem is what I know, have transitioned away from NEWA into this news. This is, so, and the other one that we kind of looked at as a front runner has not been around long enough for people to really have formed an opinion, so that really was the turnoff.
So STAR 360 's
Star
been around
360's been around for quite a bit longer than FAST or whatever it was. And we got some feedback from some of the New Hampshire principals, so that really was sort of where it tipped the scales. There is the data and feedback on this site more so than the other one.
So this will meet the requirements that NEWA currently meets. We're not
Yes.
gonna be in trouble because we're not using NEWA, this is, okay.
The packet that we got was really impact. It really will be the tool that we use to drive those data conversations at the grade level, each grade level, and at the content levels with the middle and high school grades that we're missing right now.
So we'll still be able to have those conversations of annual growth, which we have now, but we'll be able to have those conversations about how we get to that annual growth throughout the year, instead of just waiting till the end.
Well, I appreciate all the work you put into it. It sounds like you really came together as a team and collaborated on it, and for that, thank you. My only thing tonight is nothing to do with the program. It sounds great. It sounds like it's much more accountable. Because I feel like it's right here, it is just like, I know you started it in the fall, great. You did your studies through the work, but tonight we've had, I think the hesitation is that I just feel like I got it at the 11th hour. And I know you didn't. I know you've done all your work. So, but I have no hesitation on myself. I'll speak for myself here, what you're trying to achieve here. I don't have any hesitation with that. So I'll let somebody else speak and then voice my opinion on which way I'm going.
So is the board in agreement that we're gonna change from NEWA to 360?
I'm good with it.
I looked at it.
Yeah, me too.
It's just the timing.
And right now, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dale, are we down to about 3,500 now? I just want to make sure we're at the right amount.
How's that credit card too? I make a motion that we, I'm not quite sure how to word it to get the job done here, but, you can help me out with that. I'm for moving this forward, the presentation, and approving it.
That would replace the NEWA assessment where we're starting.
With the- yeah.
With Star 360 program.
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
What is that?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay. Well, Personnel Committee, have you had a meeting lately?
We have.
We have. I'm looking to do more meetings.
We will be meeting again.
Okay. Good to know. Facilities, our next meeting is until August,
Well, yeah.
right, Greg
Right.
and Dale?
That's correct.
And policy, DGH, purchasing and contracting procurement staff code of conduct is for second read and adoption tonight. And policy BID, payment for services rendered by school district offices is for second read and adoption tonight. Everybody good?
Yep.
Everybody good?
Yes.
All right, make a motion to approve policy DJH, purchasing and contracting for procurement staff code of conduct, and policy BID, payment for services rendered by school district officers for a second read and adoption.
Do you hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Superintendent's report.
Okay, I'm gonna report on the van, and nice to hear from Jerry, the 10,000 was a little higher than the actual, not that Jerry's numbers are wrong, but that reflected what was in the budget, and, versus what we spent. Unfortunately, part of that, factors in, unfortunately, didn't have to take a bus to Manchester to play the state baseball championship game this year, and some other things that, would have impacted that we couldn't have used the van for. However, the van did save us about $7,275. Since getting it actually active in March, it wasn't until March that we actually started using it much. We used it for 18 trips this year, 7 different drivers. And as I said, a cost savings of about $7,300. And that's simply based on what it would have cost us if we rented or hired Barry's or Dave's Taxis or some other transportation services to provide that service. Does not factor in what we've had to pay for gasoline or other miscellaneous expenses. So it's not a net savings, but it's pretty close. So not a bad start on a van that did not cost $80,000. It cost $34,000. So we're about 20% of the way there after only part of a year. And certainly as we go into next year and into the fall sports season, we'll be using a lot for golf and other activities as well. Today we had retraining. Not retraining, but that sounds kind of bad. The required yearly training of all drivers. So every year, anyone who drives this van will have to take a yearly refresher course, which we did today. And also we had several new drivers that took the initial training that they'll be taking, along with they'll have to take the test over at Twin Mountain, come back and do the actual driving training with Sue. But so we've got a fairly significant pool of drivers, and expect again to get a lot of good use out of that investment come next year. Any questions about the van? And thank the board for allowing us to add that. to our program starting last, or making that move last year and having it this year. I've accepted a position on the North Country Charter Academy Board. So that's every few years, people cycle off or move or change positions or just leave the board. Two superintendents from the North Country serve on that board. So I will be joining Judy McGann from Linwood as the other superintendent rep there, and looking forward to that. I think we all know that we have many students that have many different needs. The North Charter Academy certainly provides a very strong program for some of our students, and that paired with some of the other things that we're doing certainly is a good way to ensure that all students get an opportunity to get their high school diploma and all that goes with that. I want to talk briefly about this is not official data, but I did want to share with you a little bit the latest that Melanie's given me on the state assessments, the New Hampshire state assessments, how our scores stack up with the state average. So what we get is the percentage of our students that are deemed proficient, and then the percentage of the state as a whole that's deemed proficient. And that's by grade level and by three different assessments: English, language arts, mathematics, and science. English language arts and mathematics in grades 3, 4, and 5. We met above the state standards. So in some cases, our certain groups of students are scoring significantly higher than the state average. I'll point out grade 3 math, where 80% of our students are proficient. The state average is 57. So there's that extreme. Fourth grade English language arts, 80% of our students are proficient. 55% of the state is proficient. That's the good. Now we'll talk about the challenges. Our students in grades 6, 7, and 8 are not performing where they need to be. There have been some improvements in certain grade levels, but unfortunately, those 3 grade levels are all below the state average in proficient, some of which are significantly below. 11th grade data, we don't have the state averages to compare with yet because that's the SAT. So we'll have those updates when we get those. The other area though that we do give assessments in is science. Grade 5 science came in above the state average. Grade 8 science came in below, excuse me. And then grade 11 science came in above the state average. So 2 out of the 3 science assessments did come in above the state average. So we'll be giving more details of that going forward, but I did want to share with the board and, as importantly, the public that will be viewing this in the near future after it's published, that those are the preliminary numbers that we have. We are looking at how does it look overall in terms of all of our assessments if you look at them together. So if you kind of combine them and look at them together, at this point, our English language arts, which is mostly reading, but it does have some other components, is about the state average overall. At this point, our mathematics is still below the state average overall, but getting closer to the state average, the closest it's been since for several years. So we are seeing some improvement there, not as much as we want. I do know that in both buildings, a lot of work has been done, will continue to be done to look at those students individually and collectively on ways to support them, improve their performance in both of those areas, math and English language arts. Cost of Education Committee has been meeting regularly, and just a few things to share with that. We spent a lot of time looking at the CTC and wrestling with, because again, we got to remember the purpose of the committee was, or the study group was to look at our cost per pupil and see if there's anything that's a unique, different, makes our cost per pupil higher than the other 6 schools that are in the study. The original study was done by Mel Brooks. And right away, of course, one of the things that stood out was the fact that we have a career tech center and the other 6 don't. And the other 6 are sending students out. And frankly, not a lot of students out, but they're sending a few out. Bottom line is, with the exception probably of one of those schools, Woodsville or Haverhill, most of them have fairly modest investment in career tech ed. It's based on the tuition they're paying. So we have an interesting situation because we have all the costs that go into our cost per pupil of running the CTC for not only our students, but students in 5 other schools. And so we had to account for that. We have accounted for that. That cost has been identified to the best of our ability. That reduces our cost per pupil about $1,000 per pupil. So all of a sudden, instead of being way up there and a little bit out of line with the other 6, we're much closer. We're still on the high side with those other 6 schools. Cost per pupil, we're much closer to the average than we were, and frankly aren't way out there. And we never were, frankly. It's just a matter of the data and how you control and try to make things as equal as we can. I think that this group came out of it. I guess the best verbiage that came out is that the CTC is a bargain. It's a bargain, and it really is. You do the math. You look at the fact that it brings in over $500,000 a year. You look at the fact that it engages our schools and the community. You look at the fact that students that develop careers that wouldn't otherwise. The fact that they don't have to get on a bus and go, and lose valuable time on a school bus every day. We do have a handful of students that do that go over to the Whitefield, but the big thing is most of our students are able to access that right here. So that's the pretty much that phase of the work is done with that study group. Then we'll move on to other fun stuff like special ed and insurance and overall programming. But I think it kind of validates what we said for a long time, that it's a great resource, and certainly if you look at it critically, the cost to our students and our taxpayers is minimal. As the group has said, it's a bargain. So with that, I will end my report.
Thank you. Jenny, thank you for your report.
Okay, I need a motion to go into non-public.
I'll make a motion to enter into non-public session under paragraph 2, section 3 of the RSA 91A:3 of the right to know law for number 2, the hiring of any person as a public employee. Number 3, matters which if discussed in public would likely affect adversely the reputation of the person other than a member of the board. Taking with us the superintendent.
Business administrator, clerk of the board. We're all looking out there. Yes,
Wow,
you,
great
yes,
set.
yes,
He
you
needs to
principal,
go home.
elementary principal, middle school, high school principal, and director of student services.
Seriously.
Okay.
Need a second.
A second. Roll call.
Roll call.
Ray Cook.
Millie Nelson.
Kim Woodson. Yeah, thank you.
Aye. Excuse me.